Chapter 31. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The group hurried to the puddle while Kai-yu quickly introduced Zheng-en and Kai-jun to Chu Yang. Zheng-en, a burly middle-aged man, was a partner in Haigang Fishing Village. Kai-jun, a graduate student from the Department of Oceanography at Huaqiao University, worked as Professor Zhu Ming's assistant. When they reached the puddle, Zhu Ming's eyes lit up as he saw the manta ray still struggling in the water. It's definitely a bicuspid manta ray. It has two protruding head fins that are separate from the pectoral fins and is found along our country's coast. Zhu Ming, a true oceanography professor, immediately gave a clear explanation of the manta ray's origins. Chu Yang learned that there are 13 manta ray species worldwide, with 7 or 8 found in Chinese waters, plus, they're closely related to sharks and give birth to live young. They only have one pup at a time, making each manta ray an only child. Of course, Chu Yang was more interested in the fish's worth. 2 years ago, someone at the dock caught a manta ray weighing over 6,600 pounds, but it was dead when they brought it back. They sold it for 12,000 yuan, Kai-yu said, offering a reference point. Chu Yang calculated that, based on Kai-yu's information, the going rate for manta rays 2 years ago was around 3 to 4 yuan per kilogram. However, live seafood fetches 2 to 3 times the price of dead seafood, and seafood prices had risen in the past couple of years. All in all, 10 yuan per kilogram seemed reasonable, since this manta ray probably weighed around 4,400 pounds. Negotiating a price of at least 20,000 yuan seemed fair. With a target in mind, Chu Yang felt much calmer. He let Zhu Ming and Kai-jun take pictures of the manta ray from every angle, then he waved at Kai-yu and said, "Miss Kai." Kai-yu smiled and asked, "What's up?" "I wanted to express my thanks by offering you some seafood. Would you be interested?" "Oh." Kai-yu was intrigued. If she hadn't helped, she wouldn't have gotten this seafood. According to what the man said, she was curious to see what he was offering. "Let's take a look." Chu Yang led Kai-yu to the tricycle. Zheng-en noticed and followed. "Here it is," Chu Yang said, pulling back the tarp to reveal the fish. As expected, he immediately heard the reactions he was hoping for. "Oh my God, a sea pheasant that big? And there's more than one. Is that a black sea bream? It must weigh over 4 pounds. They rarely get that big." Kai-yu gasped, and even Zheng-en's eyes widened as he looked Chu Yang up and down. He'd heard Kai-yu mention this talented young fisherman, and he came along today to make sure his buddy's daughter wasn't getting scammed. Turns out, he was the one getting schooled, even disregarding the rare catches. The yellow-winged sea bream and black sea bream in the truck bed were hard for ordinary fishermen to come by. These mid-range seafood were easy to sell, too. He estimated that there must be at least 220 pounds of fish in the truck, enough for the store for 2 days. He had thought Chu Yang was all talk, but now it seemed the young fisherman was pretty skilled. "Is it any good?" Chu Yang asked, a hint of pride in his voice. Kai-yu nodded enthusiastically. "It's amazing, Mr. Chu. So many rare fish. You got all of this from that puddle?" "Yep, I've always been lucky." "Not just lucky, it's incredible." Kai-yu caught herself and swallowed an inappropriate word, then playfully stuck her tongue out at Chu Yang. "Anyway, it's amazing. I'm not sure what these are worth. You should talk to Uncle Zheng about pricing." To avoid embarrassment, she quickly passed the buck to Zheng-en. Chu Yang nodded and waited for Zheng-en to make an offer. Even with a pretty woman present, he'd still walk away if the price wasn't right. Zheng-en walked to the truck, poked around at the fish, and said, "The sea pheasants and black sea bream are the most valuable, so let's start with those. There are 4 sea pheasants. The biggest one should be over 3 gene. I'll give you 350 per gene for that, and 280 for the smaller ones. There are 2 black sea bream. 600 for the big one, and 230 for the small one. Plus, 15 for the yellowfin bream, 28 for the black snapper, 35 for the red snapper. What do you think, kid?" After a few days, Chu Yang was no longer a naive rookie. He had spent time researching the seafood market online and learning from Sun Qingjun. He wasn't a pro, but he'd come a long way. "The yellowfin are fine, but the sea chicken and black sea bream are too cheap. The sea chicken should be at least 500, and the big black hair 800 per gene. I saw you selling a half-pound black sea bream for 998 in your store last time, he countered. Zheng En smiled and shook his head. You can't calculate it like that. My rent, utilities, labor, losses, and profit are all factored in. Chu Yang knew that, but he wasn't going to sympathize with the high prices. Besides, he didn't have those concerns. He didn't need to worry about running a restaurant with a big staff. The two haggled back and forth. Zheng En was impressed. This young fisherman had a good head on his shoulders. His offer wasn't low, but Chu Yang still wouldn't budge. Chu Yang cursed the old man in his head. He was such a big shot, but he was still being stingy. Okay, here's the deal. I'll go a little higher. For 20 for the big sea chicken, 310 for the small ones, 700 for the big black sea bream, 300 for the small one. That's my final offer. Chu Yang looked at Zheng En and decided the negotiation was over, so he nodded. All right, this is our first deal. For Miss Kai's sake, consider me a friend, Uncle Zheng. Zheng En chuckled to himself, thinking that this little fisherman was smooth. He was getting a good deal but still acted like he was doing Zheng En a favor. With the price agreed upon, the next step was weighing everything. Chu Yang was going to get his scale, but Kai Yu said they had one on the boat, saving him a trip. Soon, all the fish were weighed. The largest sea chicken was 3 jin and 2 liang, and the 3 smaller ones were 5 jin and 7 liang. The big black sea bream was 2 jin and 4 liang, and the small one was 1 jin and 1 liang. The red sea bream was 16 jin. The black croaker was 11 jin, and the yellowfin was the heaviest. At 28.5 jin, add to that some smaller fish, crabs, and shellfish, the final total came to 8,016.5 yuan. But it wasn't over yet. There was still the price of the giant manta ray to negotiate. Chu Yang was thrilled and grinned from ear to ear. This haul would cover the boat rental for the next 2 months. Chapter 32. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chu Yang and Zheng En had struck a deal, and Professor Zhu Ming was wrapping up the video data collection. He approached Chu Yang. Hey, sorry about that. I got a little carried away and took up your time. Chu Yang waved it off. No problem. After all, the customer's always right. I'm hoping to buy this fish as a research specimen, but our project's strapped for cash. Could you possibly go lower, like 30,000 yuan? Professor Zhu was a research guy, totally out of his element haggling, and Chu Yang was floored by the offer. Are all professors loaded these days? Of course, he was clueless. Some professors pulled in research grants worth millions, and that's not even getting into the big shot academics. After a beat, Chu Yang nodded. All right, Professor, 30,000 it is. He probably could have squeezed out a few thousand more, but he genuinely respected these scientists doing the real work. Where would 1.3 billion people be without people like Grandpa Yuan, who pioneered hybrid rice? Or Grandma Wu, who bred watermelons sweeter than honey? Or Academician Li Yu, who made cheap enoki mushrooms possible? If his small concession could help Zhu Ming's research down the line, he'd sleep like a baby. Sun Qingjun, though, didn't share the sentiment. He tugged Chu Yang's sleeve, silently signaling that they had a mark ripe for fleecing, but Chu Yang wasn't budging. Deal done. They now had to figure out how to move this massive manta ray. Think it'd be possible to hire some villagers to help get the fish to my boat? I'd cover the cost, of course, Zhu Ming suggested. Chu Yang glanced at Sun Qingjun. He didn't exactly have a ton of friends in the village, more like a lot of rivals. No sweat, I got this. Just a matter of getting some guys to haul a fish. Plenty of strong fishermen around, especially if they were getting paid. Buzz 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 asterisk. Sun Qingjun sped off on the tricycle. About 15 minutes later, he pulled up with a truckload of fishermen, all burly and tan from the sun. They hopped out and swarmed around the puddle, eyes widening when they saw the manta ray. Sai Linmu, Qingjun, you weren't kidding about catching a monster like that. You must have tripped over a pot of gold, huh? This thing's gotta be worth thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Juner, you're buying the drinks tonight. Sun Qingjun waved his hands. The fish belongs to Yang, I'm just helping out like you guys. The fisherman turned to Chu Yang. Some started to ask for a cut or a free meal, but after they remembered that Chu Yang had the balls to confront Hibaugua, they figured it best to shut their mouths. All they could do was curse their bad luck under their breath. Alright, less talk, more action, Sun Qingjun urged. The day was getting late, and they could all be screwed when the tide came in. Let's do this. The fishermen rolled up their sleeves, rubbed their hands together, and waded into the water. They wanted to get paid as quickly as possible, and jobs were not easy to find in a little fishing village. Sun Qingjun picked out some experienced guys with a history of wrangling big fish. Once they were in the pit, a couple of them pinned down the stingray and snapped off the stinger on its tail. Then, they threw a net over its body, slid a tarp underneath, and dragged it ashore. The fish had been struggling in the pit for over an hour, and was exhausted, letting the fishermen haul it without much of a fight. After they'd finally managed to get the fish onto the yacht, Chu Yang discovered the boat actually had a live well, which could barely fit the manta ray sideways, while the fishermen were stuffing the fish into the tank. Professor Zhu Ming's assistant, Kai Jun, pulled Chu Yang aside and handed him an envelope. Chu Yang peeked inside and saw 3 stacks of crisp new 100 yuan bills, plus a scattering of 20s. 32,000 yuan. 30,000 for the fish, and 2,000 for the labor, Kai Jun said. Chu Yang flashed him a grin. Generous boss you got there. He offered him a cigarette. Kai Jun took it, surprised. Soft was he. Fishermen making bank these days. Chu Yang just smirked, playing it cool. Soon, the manta ray was secure, and Chu Yang led the fishermen off the boat. Jing'an paid up as well, handing over 8,100 yuan. Smooth sailing. Chu Yang waved as the boat pulled away, a fat wad of cash in his pocket. Kai Yu, leaning against the railing, scowled at Chu Yang's wide, toothy grin. You're such a money grubber. All it takes is a few bucks and you're that excited. She figured he was more excited about money than he was about her. All Chu Yang could think was, this girl knows me too well. Women. They just slow down the grind. Once I'm rolling in cash, the women will come flocking. In his past life, Chu Yang had seen the simps, kneeling and licking at the goddess, paying for chocolate and Ferris wheels and fireworks, and watching her ride off in another man's car. Then they would stand up and scream and oh, that they couldn't grasp that the problem was that they were simps. If they could just put all that energy into making money, everything would change. Heck, they don't even need much. If you can suck it up and work overtime at the factory for a month, they would at least have 3 to 5,000 in the bank. They could blow 1,000 on some nice clothes and another 2 grand for a hot stone massage, and then they would realize that all these goddesses were no better than anyone. Not only that, but they are gentle and respectful, and they may even give you the time of day. Sure, you can waste 2 grand on a cell phone for a goddess who is never going to pay attention to you. Or you can go out and be your own person. Humph. Kai Yu turned away, refusing to look at him. Chu Yang didn't give a damn. After ruling the universe for eons, he knew that all women, no matter how rich, were the same. If you start groveling, she will look down on you. If you ignore her, she might just start to wonder. Humph. Seeing that Chu Yang was still unfazed, Kai Yu was furious. Uncle Zheng, just take us back to the city. I can't stand this stupid island. Zheng Yan glanced at his niece, then at Chu Yang, and said nothing, simply turning the rudder. When the boat was a few hundred yards from the shore, Chu Yang turned to Sun Qingjun and handed him half a stack of bills. Uncle Qingjun, thanks for all your help. Sun Qingjun stared in shock. His cheap nephew was really paying him. That's 5,000 yuan. Even though he was tempted, he declined. I can't take that much. Chu Yang just stuffed the money into his arms. Use it to pay the others, he said, and left with Chu Shi. Sun Qingjun shook his head, feeling embarrassed, but also excited. 5,000 yuan. He'd promised 6 guys 600 yuan each, which left him with 400. He couldn't make that much in a month out at sea. Could this really work if I stick with him? Sun Qingjun suddenly felt a surge of hope for their upcoming sea trip. Chapter 33. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Holding Chu Shi's hand as they walked home, they both yawned. Staying up late to drain that puddle was brutal. Less of that, the better. You push yourself too hard, and you're just asking for trouble. Bro, look. A fight. She suddenly yelled, all excited. Chu Yang glanced up. Sure enough, there was a crowd gathered in the village square, forming a ring. They pushed their way to the front, and Chu Yang could finally see what was going on. Lu Tuixian had a girl by the hair, slapping her face with her fat hands, looking absolutely crazed as she wailed, Sai Linmu, you crazy little bitch, you dare break my glass. I'll beat you to death. That the girl didn't cry or beg. Instead, she grabbed a fistful of Lu Tuixian's hair and started jabbing at her ribs. She knew what she was doing. A shot to the ribs is the quickest way to make someone wish they were dead. Sure enough, Lu Tuixian shrieked in pain. Jesus, that she nearly wet herself and let go of the girl's hair. The girl scrambled back, looking up to find herself surrounded by staring faces. Then, a familiar face swam into view, strange, yet somehow warm. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of hope. Without thinking, she ran towards him. Shit, Chu Yang muttered. He really didn't want to get involved. He was so tired he could have passed out right there, but they'd met before. He couldn't just stand by and watch, could he? Right, the girl getting the beatdown was the same one he'd saved from He Yuanhang's creepiness last time. Earlier, while he was draining the puddle, he'd overheard Sun Qingjun saying that Lu Tuixian's glass cup had been smashed. He'd had a hunch it was this girl, and guess he was right. Revenge was a dish best served shattered. Damn, that's the kind of temper I can get behind. Lu Tuixian might have been pissed, but Chu Yang was secretly enjoying this. There was no way he was going to let this source of entertainment go to waste. He pulled the girl behind him, then he pointed at Lu Tuixian, who was charging toward them, and shouted, "What do you think you're doing, hitting people in broad daylight?" Lu Tuixian was furious. Seeing someone step in, she didn't care who it was and snarled, "Who the hell are you, sticking your nose where it doesn't belong, trying to be a hero in front of me?" Chu Yang's face darkened. He took a step forward and said, "Cold as ice, keep it up, and I'll kill you." Lu Tuixian recognized him then, and her face got even uglier. Part of it was pure spite, but the other part was that she actually didn't dare curse him again. It felt like a gag. If anyone else had threatened her, she would have brushed it off and cursed them back to the Stone Age, but she was genuinely afraid of Chu Yang. The guy didn't even give a damn about He Baogua. He'd come back from the dead, climbing out of the sea in a coffin like some kind of vengeful spirit. Who knew if he'd make good on his threat? "You, what do you want? Don't get any ideas. This crazy bitch smashed my glass first. She deserved it." Lu Tuixian shouted, trying to pull the crowd onto her side. "Ask them." She admitted it herself. She pointed at the onlookers, but they all backed away from her like she had the plague. No one was going to stick their neck out for He Tuixian, and especially not against Chu Yang. "Tsk," Chu Yang scoffed. "See? The people have spoken." "Bullshit." It was obviously. Lu Tuixian tried to curse again, but Chu Yang just raised an eyebrow, and her voice trailed off. "Obviously bullshit. Your son had it coming. He was messing with people. She should have burned your house down." With that, Chu Yang turned his back on her pig-liver-colored face and headed home, pulling Chu Shi along. The girl he'd saved trailed after them. Reaching his door, Chu Yang turned to her. "We're home. Want to come in and sit for a while?" The girl ducked her head, took a couple of steps back, and shook her head like a bobblehead. Chu Yang had expected as much. This girl didn't warm up to people. "Then I'm going in. Don't worry. After the tongue-lashing I gave Lu Tuixian today, she shouldn't bother you for a while." The girl gave a small nod. Still silent, Chu Yang opened his mouth, yawned, and stepped into the yard. As he was halfway through the door, the girl finally spoke. "Are you hiring?" "Huh?" Chu Yang didn't catch it. "I said, are you hiring?" The girl repeated, barely a whisper. Chu Yang heard her this time. "Yeah, I am." He gave her a good look. "Why? You got a friend to recommend?" The girl hesitated. After 10 long seconds, she said, "Could I?" You? Chu Yang felt awkward. Standing up for her was one thing, but being on a fishing boat was no joke. Besides the fishing experience, the job required serious strength, and it wasn't exactly a lady-friendly environment. Most boats didn't even have toilets. The guys just, went over the side. It wouldn't be very practical if there were women around, unless it was a family-run boat. They generally didn't take on women. I'm strong. I can fish. I grew up on a fishing boat. I can help you make money. The girl lifted her head, her eyes burning with determination. It was the first time Chu Yang had really seen her face. How to describe it? She looked both young and old at the same time. Especially her eyes, which held a sadness that was hard to imagine on a teenager. Is that a no? Seeing his hesitation, the light in her eyes faded again. Chu Yang suddenly felt a pang of pity. Maybe having a sister in this life had made him soft. He thought for a moment and asked, "Can you cook?" The girl nodded. Yes. Okay. The boat could use a cook, but let me be clear, I have to try your cooking first. If it sucks, I won't hire you. Chu Yang said, trying to sound serious. The girl nodded eagerly. Okay. Then come on in. You can make lunch. Chu Yang turned to go inside. Then he stopped and turned back to her. Oh, and by the way, mind telling me your name? I can't exactly have crew members without knowing their names, right? She hesitated for a moment, then whispered, Lin Zijin. Chapter 34. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Qingqing Zijin, her name echoed in my heart. Nice name, Chu Yang said. These days, you hear names like Yan Fong Xia for country girls all the time. It's rare to come across such an elegant name, straight out of classic poetry. You can tell her parents valued education. Lin Zijin's eyes flickered at the praise, a rare thing for her, before settling back into their usual calm. Seeing Chu Yang wasn't going to pry, she visibly relaxed. Once inside the yard, Chu Yang showed Lin Zijin to the kitchen, pointed out the ingredients, and told her to make herself at home. Brother, she grabbed Chu Yang as he left the kitchen, starting to say something, then hesitating. What's up? Chu Yang asked. Brother, the people in the village, they say she's bad luck, that it'll bring us misfortune to take her in. After a pause, she blurted it out, clearly uncomfortable gossiping. She glanced back towards the kitchen. Chu Yang smiled and ruffled her hair. Don't listen to that nonsense. Bad luck? It's just those busybody women in the village flapping their gums. Didn't they used to say we were cursed and brought about our parents' death? You'd be better off listening to my farts than to them. Chu Yang put his hand behind himself and pretended to scoop up a fart for her to smell. Ew, gross. Brother, you're disgusting. She giggled and ran off. The brother and sister playfully argued until their voices faded. Lin Zijin, who had been hiding behind the kitchen wall, allowed herself a small smile. Eat, eat. Chu Yang was relaxing on the rattan chair in the yard with Chu Shi when he heard someone whisper in his ear. He opened his eyes and saw Lin Zijin standing beside him, hands clasped behind her back. Oh, food's ready. He stretched and nudged Chu Shi awake. Wake up, sleepyhead, time to eat. No, I'm sleepy. You eat first, I'll eat later, Chu Shi mumbled, clinging to the chair, but Chu Yang wasn't having it. She'd been running around all night, her stomach was empty. He wasn't about to let her skip a meal. Nope. Get up now. Eat, then sleep. Chu Shi played possum, refusing to budge no matter what Chu Yang did. Okay, you asked for it, Chu Yang said, grinning. A few seconds later, Chu Shi, half asleep, suddenly felt a cold shock on the back of her neck. She shivered and jolted awake. Br. That's cold. I hate you, brother. Chu Yang tossed the ice cube to the ground, unrepentant. Let's go, since you're awake. Sitting at the immortal table, there were 4 dishes and 2 bowls of rice, stir-fried yellow beef, pork ribs with taro, stir-fried cabbage with dried shrimp, and smashed cucumbers. Chu Yang tried the beef first. Delicious. The beef was sliced against the grain and must have been marinated with ginger, soy sauce, and scallions. The starch coating gave it a tender texture. He sampled the other dishes. The taro was soft, the pork ribs were tender, and the cucumbers were tangy and crisp. They were just simple home-style dishes, but tasted as good as anything you'd get in a fancy restaurant. Chu Yang had originally hired Lin Zijin to help her, but now she had proven to be a real find. "You're hired. You're the cook on my boat from now on." Hearing Chu Yang's approval, Lin Zijin breathed a sigh of relief, the weight on her chest lifting. "Sit down and eat with us," Chu Yang said, patting the empty stool beside him. No, I'm not hungry." Lin Zijin shook her head, but almost as soon as the words left her mouth, her stomach let out a loud rumble. Lin Zijin's face flushed. She felt like crying. She hadn't cried when Yuan Hang had pulled her hair, or when Lu Zuexian had slapped her, but now, she was so mortified she wanted to burst into tears. "You sure don't sound like you're not hungry. Come on, you gonna disobey the boss?" Chu Yang chuckled, trying to keep a straight face. Chu Shi's face was red, and a grain of rice shot out of her right nostril. "Ah. Okay." Lin Zijin finally sat down. Chu Shi filled a large bowl with rice and handed it to Lin Zijin with a smile. Chu Yang frowned. That was uncalled for. He picked up a big piece of pork rib and put it in Lin Zijin's bowl. He said nothing, just kept eating. Lin Zijin was hesitant at first, carefully picking up rice with her chopsticks, but after a while, watching Chu Yang and his sister happily eating, she was caught up in the atmosphere and started eating with gusto. "That's more like it." Chu Yang laughed. Lin Zijin blushed and ducked her head, half her face hidden behind the bowl. After lunch, Chu Yang burped contentedly. Chu Shi brought him a bowl of iced well water with watermelon, and Lin Zijin was washing dishes in the kitchen. "Ah, that's the life." Chu Yang was in bliss, but things weren't so peaceful at Lu Zuexian's house. Fuming, Lu Zuexian arrived home to find Dongnan chopping wood in the yard. Immediately, she threw her hands up and launched into a tantrum. "Oh, God, why am I so cursed to marry a useless lump like you? Your wife's getting bullied to death, and you just chop wood like a zombie. If I slept with someone one day, would you even notice?" Aunt Zhang, who was leaning against the wall next door to enjoy the show, couldn't help but laugh. "Ha ha ha, not likely. No man's gonna touch you, afraid of getting crushed. Mind your own business. Who are you calling fat?" Hearing the mockery, Lu Zuexian turned on her. Aunt Zhang wasn't backing down. "At least I'm not a blimp. Chu Yang's right, you're a tank." Chu Yang. "Okay, enough, you're embarrassing yourself." "Who did what to you?" Dongnan frowned, finally speaking up, but who was Lu Zuexian to be silenced? Not only did she refuse to shut up, but she raised her voice. "Oh, now you're gonna act tough. Who do you think? Your good-for-nothing nephew, that's who. I was teaching that crazy girl who broke my window a lesson. What's it to him? Who does he think he is, some hotshot lawyer, sticking his nose in other people's business? Look at him, he can't do anything." With Chu Yang not around, Lu Zuexian felt free to vent, sneering and cursing to her heart's content. Of course, she held back from saying anything too nasty, anything that would insult the family. She was afraid it would get back to Chu Yang. The more she ranted, the more she felt wronged. She could only take it out on Dongnan. "You're such a coward. People will think you didn't just break your leg, you broke something else too." Dongnan tightened his grip on the hatchet, but he said nothing and continued to chop wood in silence. Lu Zuexian went on for a while, but when Dongnan ignored her, she decided it wasn't worth the effort and turned to leave. "Grandma, where are you going?" "I'm hungry. Make me something to eat." Yuan Hang called out from behind. "Eat, eat, eat. That's all you ever do. There are instant noodles in the cabinet. Make them yourself." Lu Zuexian didn't even turn around. Yuan Hang looked miserable. Ever since Chu Shi left, he'd been eating instant noodles 3 times a day and was wasting away. He'd weighed himself that morning and was only 139.8 pounds. Oh, when will this suffering end? Chapter 35. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Damn it, Dogwang, when will this day be over? Lu Tuixian griped into the phone in the village store's booth, complaining non-stop. On the other end, in a rundown rental in Quancheng, Lu Fuguang, a two-bit thug with a buzz cut and tattoos crawling up the backs of his hands, leaned back on a creaky wooden bed, a Nokia phone clamped to his ear, his face etched with annoyance. Auntie, didn't I tell you not to keep calling if it's not important? Dogwang, I had no choice. Last time I asked you to do something, you bailed and just took the money. What do you mean I didn't do it? Didn't he end up in the ocean? Lu Fuguang scowled. Hearing that, Lu Tuixian glanced around nervously, then cupped her hand around the receiver and lowered her voice. He fell in, all right, but he lived. What's going on? Lu Fuguang demanded. Lu Tuixian spilled the whole story about Chu Yang, naturally embellishing it with tales of how she was being mistreated. He's really alive. He's really alive. And he's totally different since that night. He's even ruder to me. The way he looks at me, it's like he wants me dead. A sudden thought struck Lu Tuixian. Dogwang, do you think he suspects something? The more Lu Tuixian dwelled on it, the more terrified she became, and the more she regretted everything. If I had known, I wouldn't have been so greedy for that little bit of demolition money. If he calls the cops, are we going to get arrested? Her voice trembled. Lu Tuixian might not know the ins and outs of the law, but she understood the basic principle of an eye for an eye. Why are you freaking out? He's alive. Besides, I was waiting there all night. Nobody else was around. Stop scaring yourself. Lu Fuguang may have been a small-time hoodlum, but he had more street smarts than a simple village woman like Lu Tuixian, and he knew how the law worked. Even if Chu Yang suspected something, what could he do without proof? Call the cops. They need evidence. Dogwang, I'm scared. By the end, Lu Tuixian was sobbing like a pathetic mess. Stop whining. I'll head back to the village in a couple of days and take a look around. If Chu Yang was fine, there was no reason for him to hide out in the city. Living in the city was bleeding him dry. Renting a dumpy room cost 200 or 300, and the girls at the salon, as sweet as they seemed, were ruthless when it came to money. The 20,000 yuan he'd gotten from Lu Tuixian was already gone. He needed to go back and check things out. Lu Tuixian mentioned the kid was raking it in with fishing. Lu Fuguang stroked his stubbly chin, lost in thought. After hanging up, Lu Tuixian wiped her tears and took a deep breath. I'm not scared. Yeah, I'm not scared. It's no big deal. But no sooner had she stepped out of the phone booth than a hand tapped her shoulder just a few feet away. Tuixian. Lu Tuixian jumped out of her skin, scared witless. Geez, you scared me to death. Grandma's son patted her chest, her heart pounding. Tuixian, what's wrong with you? I just tapped your shoulder. You made such a racket, I almost had a heart attack. I wanted to ask you something. Lu Tuixian, recovering her composure, snapped, sneaking up on people like that. Don't you know you can scare someone to death? Without waiting for Grandma's son to reply, she hurried away. Psycho. Grandma's son watched her go, muttering about bad luck and wondering if she'd stepped in something nasty that morning. What's she so jumpy about? Sounds like she's afraid of getting caught. After grumbling, Grandma's son went into the phone booth. She wanted to call her son in the provincial capital. She hadn't been feeling well lately and wanted to visit him, but before she could pick up the phone, it rang. Grandma's son answered it. It's done. I'll be back on the island the day after tomorrow. Wire me 5 grand ASAP. The voice on the other end blurted out as soon as she answered. Who is this? Who are you trying to reach? Grandma's son asked, confused, but the person hung up even faster. Oops, wrong number, beep beep beep. Grandma's son, Chu Yang, woke up from an afternoon nap to find the sky dim. He stretched and jumped up, feeling like he was finally alive again. Xiaoxi. Xiaoxi, that he barely called out twice when he saw someone emerge from the main hall, but it wasn't Chushi. It was Lin Zijin. You're still here. I thought you'd gone home. What are you doing? Chu Yang asked, noticing the feather duster in Lin Zijin's hand. Oh, I saw your place was a bit of a mess, so I cleaned it up. I didn't move anything, and I was just about to leave. Lin Zijin explained quickly, afraid Chu Yang would misunderstand. Chu Yang smiled. I wasn't saying anything. I should thank you for cleaning my house so well. He'd been wondering why things felt different when he woke up. The eaves and corners looked different. Now he knew it was because they were clean. Actually, Chu Yang and Chushi were pretty tidy. They swept and wiped down surfaces every day, but only in the areas they used. As for the hidden corners and places they didn't usually go, he couldn't be bothered. He'd been thinking of hiring someone to clean it up one day, but he hadn't expected Lin Zijin to do it. It's nothing. I'm free anyway. I'll be going now. Lin Zijin handed him back the duster. Don't rush off. Have dinner before you leave. Chu Yang offered. No, I can't eat. Lin Zijin refused firmly. She'd already felt bad about eating lunch there. She didn't have any money to pay him back, so she'd cleaned the house to make up for it. She couldn't possibly eat dinner, too. Alright, I won't insist you eat, but wait here a second. Chu Yang turned and went back into the house, returning moments later with a bag. Take this. Don't say no. This is an advance on your chef's salary. Remember to be at the dock next Monday morning at 7 o'clock sharp. Lin Zijin hesitated, then accepted the bag. Thank you, she whispered, her lips barely moving. After leaving the yard and returning to her own run-down, leaky but clean shack, Lin Zijin sat on the straw-filled bed and opened the plastic bag. Tea, eggs, sausages, chicken legs, pig's feet, milk, instant noodles, all the good stuff from a supermarket, a rare treat in a fishing village. And this, with trembling fingers, she pulled out the envelope tucked under the bag and opened it carefully. When she saw 500 yuan in cash inside, Lin Zijin's eyes immediately welled up. Thank you. Thank you. Lin Zijin bit her lip tightly, unable to stop the tears that streamed down her face, soaking into the ground. Brother, why not just give her the money? Back at home, Chushi asked, resting his chin in his hand. Chu Yang smiled and shook his head. 500 yuan can't buy a girl's last bit of pride. Chapter 36. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the evening, Chushi reheated the leftover beef and ribs from lunch, stir-fried some green peppers, and made a mussel soup. The two of them ate a simple meal. After dinner, Chu Yang took Chushi for a walk. Before they even reached the village head's house, Aunt Zhang stopped them. Chu Yang, I heard you caught a bunch of good stuff in that puddle this morning, including a huge manta ray, and sold it for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Chu Yang. More like several million. I was just about to head to the city and buy a building to celebrate. Aunt Zhang's smile faltered, but she recovered. Oh, come on, kid, no need to get sassy. Aunt Zhang's just looking out for you. She reached out to grab him, but Chu Yang was ready this time. Hey now, if you've got something to say, say it. Keep your hands to yourself, Aunt Zhang. What are you scared of, kid? Do you think I'm going to bite you? Aunt Zhang wasn't thrilled with Chu Yang's attitude, but she played it cool. What do you think about what I told you last time? How about I have my niece come over and you two meet? Nope. My dog's about to pop out a new litter of puppies. Gotta go. Chu Yang didn't give Aunt Zhang another word in, and took off running. Ugh, that rude, unlucky kid. Aunt Zhang was annoyed, but giving up wasn't an option, so she started plotting a new strategy. Her niece was getting older and had ridiculously high standards. She went to some second-rate vocational school, but insisted on marrying a college grad. Her brother, the girl's dad, was useless, so there was no way he could find a college guy for her. Aunt Zhang hadn't wanted to get involved in the first place. Like father, like daughter, she figured, but then Chu Yang had to go and get rich. Looks like this is falling on me. Aunt Zhang thought, Feeling smug, the brother and sister escaped Aunt Zhang and slipped away from the village head's house. Passing by their uncle's place, they noticed his window was covered with newspaper. Yuanhang was squatting by the door, glumly eating instant noodles. Instant noodles are great once in a while, but who could eat them every day? Suddenly, as if the heavens themselves couldn't stand it, a strong gust of wind blew the newspaper off the window. Years of accumulated dust rained down, adding about 100 new spices to little Tank's noodles. Ha! You deserve that, Chu. She burst out laughing at Yuanhang's face. You, don't get cocky. My brother is coming back too. Yuanhang glared at the gleeful siblings, wanting to yell but not daring to. Oh, big deal, Chu. She shrugged, completely unfazed. Little Tank was beyond mad. Just wait till my brother gets back, he thought. I'll show them who's boss. Fuming, Little Tank decided to eat his anger and shoveled a mouthful of noodles into his face, and then he remembered the dust. Sour, bitter, salty, spicy, pungent, all the flavors hit him at once. It was like taking a handful of ancient sludge from a septic tank and jamming it in his mouth. Bleg, bleg. Little Tank started gagging. Chu Yang came home in a good mood, played a few rounds of Snake on his phone, and passed out. The next morning, he woke up, took a satisfying dump, washed his hands twice with some cheap-ass soap, and got ready to open the treasure chest. Congratulations. You've won a black iron treasure chest. Location refreshed. Go claim your prize. Another black iron treasure chest, out at sea again, even farther this time. Damn it. This cheap soap is bad luck. Switching to something else next time. There were now 3 black iron treasure chests out on the ocean. He wondered how many fish he'd pull in this time. 50,000. 100,000. He knew the system wouldn't let him down. System, don't think I'm gonna let you off the hook just because you said something nice for once. Humph. After breakfast, Chu Yang sat in the yard, bored, looking at the overgrown garden plots by the wall. An idea popped into his head. His parents had cleared these plots years ago and used to grow onions, garlic, peppers, and stuff. But they'd been neglected for so long they were just weeds now. Chu Yang rubbed his chin. How about I plant something? He immediately jumped into action. Chu Yang ran to the shed, grabbed a hoe, and started hacking away at the weeds. She saw him and asked, Brother, are you going to plant onions? Yeah. We're gonna be living here, so there's no grocery store to buy stuff. We can grow our own onions, garlic, ginger, peppers, fruits, and vegetables. Then we don't have to worry about going hungry. Yay! She clapped and cheered. Plant some tomatoes. I love tomatoes. Okay, I like tomatoes too. Chu Yang nodded, fired up. As the two were dreaming up their garden, Baoguo walked past with his hands behind his back, looking sour. Seeing Chu Yang hoeing the ground, his brow furrowed. That punk is really trying to stick it to the village. What are we gonna do, secretary? Boss Li called me again last night, asking if I'd done anything. Xiong de Kue whined, trailing behind him. Boss Li wanted to build a seafood processing plant on Chu Yang's land. Chu Yang wouldn't agree, and Boss Li was getting impatient. Baoguo was giving him grief, too. Xiong de Kue felt like he was getting it from all sides. What are we gonna do? Nothing. Just let it go, Baoguo snapped. What could he do? He was just some old village secretary, not even on the government payroll. He could usually bully the honest fisherman by throwing around the government's name, but Chu Yang knew his rights and wasn't afraid to use them. I hear De Jun's been trying to recruit sailors lately. Baoguo asked, changing the subject. Xiong de Kue nodded. Yeah, he and Chu Yang are fixing up a boat to go out to sea. Where'd he get the money? Baoguo asked. Rented it. Costs him tens of thousands a month, I hear, Xiong de Kue said. Baoguo's eyes lit up. Great. Divine justice is on our side. That punk is gonna go broke. Rent a boat to go out to sea. What an idiot. He'd lose a fortune on fuel, labor, and rent. When he runs out of money, he'll be begging the village to let him tear down the house. Hey Bear, go tell Big Eyes, Big Biao, and big lay not to sign on with Chu Yang's crew. Got it. Dutty Baogwa was talking about the best fisherman in the village. He wanted to make sure Chu Yang couldn't find enough crew. Xiong de Kuei's eyes brightened, and he gave a thumbs up. Secretary, you're a genius. Ha! He's no match for me. Dutty Baogwa cackled. In a few days, that kid will be crawling back, begging you for help. Then you've got him right where you want him. Xiong de Kuei nodded, but he was still worried. What if Chu Yang didn't lose money out at sea? What if he actually made a profit? Then what? He didn't dare say anything though, or he'd get yelled at. Xiong de Kuei decided to go to the temple and burn some incense to pray that Chu Yang would fail. Chapter 37. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Achoo, achoo, achoo. Okay, who's thinking about me? Chu Yang sniffed. Don't get a big head, dude. Grandma says 1 sneeze means someone's thinking of you, 2 means someone's talking smack, and 3 means you're catching a cold. You're not getting sick, are you? She reached out and touched his forehead. Knock it off. Chu Yang swatted her hand away. But now his throat did feel a little scratchy. You really got a cold? Turns out, she was right. A few hours later, Chu Yang was coughing, sneezing, running a fever, and his throat was so swollen it hurt to swallow. He stayed up late hauling water, got soaked, then caught a chill. She figured, they were out of medicine, so she had to ask Grandma's son for help. Pretty soon, Grandma's son showed up with a bowl. Here, this is mugwort tea with ginger. Drink it hot, then lie down and sweat it out. You'll be right as rain. Chu Yang just nodded. Since opening his mouth hurt too much to talk, he took the bowl. Even before he brought it close, the smell was sharp and bitter. He frowned. He'd thought Sanjiu cold medicine tasted bad. Drink up. The best medicine tastes the worst, Grandma's son said. She nodded. Yeah, be a good boy. Chu Yang, swallowing felt like razor blades, but he choked down the whole bowl. Maybe it was just in his head, but he already felt a little better. He crawled into bed, pulled the covers over himself, and slept off and on all day. The next morning, he finally felt like himself again. Still a little sniffly, but his throat didn't hurt, his head wasn't spinning, and he had way more energy. Feeling human again, he was starving. She had made a pot of seafood dumpling soup, and he downed 2 big bowls. Now he was ready to roll. He grabbed his hoe and got back to work in the field. One good thing about being reborn in this era. The internet wasn't so all-consuming. No addictive phone games or endless videos sucking up your time. People actually had to find things to do, which was way healthier. Compared to 10 years later, when even little kids had phones and were already wearing Coke bottle glasses, She glanced at the clock on the wall when he was about halfway through the last row. 10:30, almost time to think about lunch. She clapped her hands. Hey, we're out of salt. I'm gonna run to the store and grab a bag. Chu Yang waved his hand. Go ahead. I can handle the rest. You got money? Yep, you gave me 200 yesterday. She was already heading out the door. Chu Yang suddenly remembered something and chased her to the door. And get a bar of soap, gotta be safeguard. She wondered why he'd suddenly ditched his old brand, but she just nodded. Got it. When she got back with the salt and soap, Chu Yang had already hoed half the field. He snatched the soap. My hands are filthy. He ripped open the package, lathered up his hands, front and back, left and right, and took a deep sniff after rinsing. Still the same great formula, same great smell. He rubbed his hands together. Time to draw. Congratulations. Silver treasure chest unlocked. Location refreshed. Go claim it. Oh my god, it actually works. Seeing the flashing light on the system's navigation, Chu Yang kissed the soap, the silver treasure chest, and it was on the beach. He spit out the suds that had gotten on his lips, grinning like a loon. She watched her brother, wondering if his fever had fried his brain. Luckily, he snapped out of it pretty quick and told her to get lunch going. gotta eat to work. Wonder what kind of goodies that silver treasure chest had in store. She got moving, and half an hour later, they had 3 dishes and a soup on the table. Stir-fried pork with peppers, fried small fish, cold seaweed, and loofah and egg soup, simple, but satisfying. After lunch, he helped her clear the table. Let's go, time for a beach walk. North Beach? She asked. Chu Yang shook his head. South Beach today. What's on the South Beach? You can't even find decent crabs there, she said, unimpressed. She was a practical sort and didn't like going somewhere she couldn't make a buck. Just walk off lunch. We can grab some shells, toss them in the fish pond for decoration, Chu Yang said with a smile. Actually, he was practical too, but the system had put the treasure chest on the South Beach this time, so that's where he had to be. Fine. Even though it was just for shells, Chu Yang was fully geared up, bringing a sand shovel, rake, hook, harpoon, fish basket, and sack. The brother and sister locked up and headed toward the South Beach. It was midday, and most of the fishermen were home eating. But some of the lazybones were chilling under the banyan tree at the edge of town. They saw Chu Yang with all his gear and gave him some half-joking comments. Yang, still hittin' the sea in the middle of the day. Finned in any good fish? You gonna take one of us along? Yeah, you took De June a couple times, take your auntie this time. I used to hold you in my arms when you were little. Don't need much, you find the spot and I'll do the work. We can split the seafood 50-50. Chu Yang ignored them and kept walking with Chu Shi. Seriously. This bunch was shameless. Not even offering a cent, but still asking to tag along. Did he look like he needed the help? And splitting the catch in half. Talk about being ugly with pretty thoughts. Those 2 brats, no manners at all, can't even answer their elders. Just got lucky and found a few good fish. Why are they acting so high and mighty? He's a college boy, should have been strangled at birth. He probably drowned his brains when he fell in the ocean. That's right, that the peanut gallery rolled their eyes and muttered insults as the brother and sister walked away. Chu Yang knew they weren't saying anything nice, but as the saying goes. If a dog bites you, do you bite it back? Of course, if a dog dared to bark in his face, he'd shut it up real quick. The South Beach was a bit further. It took them about 20 minutes to get there. Chu Yang followed the system's navigation and located the treasure chest. Silver treasure chest opened. Reward, random refresh of marine economic creatures, rare. Capture time limit, 30 minutes. Then the system marked the refresh range with the light band. 30 minutes. That's it? Chu Yang was surprised, and secretly thrilled. What did this mean? Whatever it was, it must be seriously rare. And rare things were usually valuable. Gotta move. Chu Yang started searching right away. He thought it would take some looking, but after a few steps, he felt something weird under his feet. Soft and slippery, like stepping on jelly. He bent over, felt around, and pulled out something orange-red and covered in spikes. Holy crap, dude, that's a giant sea cucumber. Chu Shi yelled. Chu Yang was over the moon. With a big sea cucumber like that, he was gonna hit the jackpot. Safeguard, you're my hero. Chapter 38. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The plum blossom sea cucumber is a type of sea cucumber, an incredibly valuable seafood, and one of the largest in the world. Most sea cucumbers max out around the size of your palm. Finding one that's a foot long is considered rare, but a plum blossom sea cucumber can reach over 3 feet long and 4 inches wide. Can you imagine a plum blossom sea cucumber as long as a kid's arm still being a juvenile? Of course, size impacts quality. In China, sea cucumbers from the Liaoning and Shandong areas are considered top tier because they're thorny, go dormant in the summer, and take a long time to grow. Those from other areas are seen as inferior, but the plum blossom sea cucumber is an exception. It's super sensitive to environmental changes. Things like seawater pollution, or sudden shifts in density and temperature, can cause them to literally rot or puke up their insides, so, any plum blossom sea cucumber is considered top quality. commanding prices as high as those Liao sea cucumbers. Back in his previous life, Chu Yang had plenty of plum blossom sea cucumbers, stolen by his pushy wife from his father-in-law to nourish him. Too bad all that nourishment seemed to leak right out, a total waste. Still, he had to give his former wife some credit. Even though she liked to take advantage of him, she at least introduced him to this type of sea cucumber, so he recognized it instantly. This thing, pure wild, will fetch at least $1,000 in 10 years. Forget about it if it isn't 5 figures. Even in 2007, that's not cheap. Hurry up and see if there are any more, Chu Yang said. He didn't need to. The sight of the plum blossom sea cucumber had triggered Chu Shi's money-grubbing instincts. She was already digging around in the sand with hands and feet. Found one, bro. I got one too. A few moments later, Chu Shi came up, hugging a plum blossom sea cucumber and shouting excitedly. Chu Yang told her to pipe down. Shh, quiet. Look for more. We'll lose out if we draw a crowd. Okay. Chu Shi clammed up fast. If the village gossips saw this, they'd go nuts. Brother and sister bent over, carefully searching the beach. Plum blossom sea cucumbers like to bury themselves in the sand, disguising themselves with it, like wearing a ghillie suit. Even if one's right in front of you, you wouldn't spot it unless you stepped on it. Luckily, he had Tongzi's light to help, otherwise covering that half-mile of coastline in half an hour would be near impossible, let alone finding sea cucumbers. Brother, look at this. A little later, Chu Shi shouted excitedly again, holding a massive sea cucumber, nearly as long as she was, with both hands. Wow, that's huge. Chu Yang was shocked. Based on the size, it had to be over 3 feet long. The flesh was plump, tender, and yellowish, with thick thorns clustered at the base, like winter plum blossoms in bloom. Hurry, pack it up. Chu Yang opened the sack, and Chu Shi carefully tossed the plum blossom sea cucumber inside. The bag instantly felt heavier. Wow, easily 10 pounds, and dried, it'd be over £1. Brother, this has gotta be worth a lot, right? Chu Shi's eyes were practically flashing dollar signs. For sure, tens of thousands. Whoa! Chu Shi's jaw dropped. Tens of thousands. What was that even? 1 + 1 is 3, 2 is 26, 3 is 45. Nope, she couldn't even fathom it. Anyway, it definitely meant she could buy tons of Barbie dolls. Look, keep looking. Gotta keep looking. Chu Shi's energy was endless. She felt inexhaustible. The thrill of finding money was awesome, but all too brief. Half an hour flew by, as he dropped the last plum blossom sea cucumber, as long and thick as an adult's arm, into the sack. Chu Yang saw the timer reset to 0. Sure enough, the sea cucumbers that had been appearing every few feet completely vanished in the next 10 minutes. Where'd they go? Chu Shi put her hands on her hips, looking disappointed. Chu Yang patted her head, smiling. Don't be greedy. We got plenty. And they really did. The 50-kilo urea bag Chu Yang was carrying was stuffed full, with even more crammed into the net bag. Now the problem was getting it all back. Bringing it back in the open would definitely set off the entire village's sharingans. The lucky streak was already being talked about. Chu Yang didn't want to be swarmed every time he went to the sea. Xiaoxi, stay here. I'll run get Uncle Qingjuan's cart. Chu Shi nodded firmly. No problem. After hiding the sea cucumbers behind a rock and making sure no one was around, Chu Yang took off. He covered the 20-minute walk in just 5 minutes, gasping for air. Quick, huff, quick, Uncle Qingjun. What's wrong with you? You running from a dog? Sun Qingjun joked. Need your tricycle, quick, and a sack. Ignoring the teasing, Chu Yang urged him on. Sun Qingjun was curious, but didn't push. He unclipped the keychain from his belt and tossed it over. You know how to drive one of those? Want me to do it? Got it. Gotta go, explain later. He hopped onto the seat, jammed in the key, twisted the throttle, and roared off. It wasn't that Chu Yang was suspicious, but money was a powerful motivator. He knew Sun Qingjun was trustworthy, but there's a saying, don't use money to test people's hearts. And as for driving, Chu Yang had been a gearhead with money in his previous life. He'd driven everything from a 100-ton truck to a go-kart. Riding a tricycle was child's play. He raced back to the beach. Thankfully, it was so hot no one was around. Chu Yang started by moving the sea cucumbers from the fish basket into the new sack, then hauled both sacks into the cart, even covering them with a layer of seaweed. "Hop on, let's go home." Chu Yang patted the seat behind him. She stepped on the pedal and climbed up. She ducked under Chu Yang's arm, settling in front of him. "I like sitting here." "Whatever you want." Chu Yang twisted the throttle. The tricycle vibrated and hummed, with no real rush. Chu Yang didn't drive fast. She snuggled into Chu Yang's arms, resting her chin on the fuel tank, letting the sea breeze kiss her cheeks. "So cool. Comfy, right? Someday, I'll buy you a car and we'll go for a real ride. It'll be even better than this." "Yay! I want to ride in a car." She clapped her hands and laughed, scattering her joy all over the road. Chapter 39. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the village square, folks were still hanging around, taking it easy. When they spotted the brother and sister coming back on the tricycle, they craned their necks like a gaggle of geese, trying to see what they had. Seeing the load in the back, they perked up. "Look at those two, always hustling. Out gathering seaweed in this heat. Wow, that's enough to cover half a roof when it dries." Most of the houses here are stone, built with rocks and yellow mud, and roofed with seaweed, kind of like thatched roofs used to be. Seaweed works even better than thatch, waterproof and keeps the place warm. Layer it thick, and you're set for winter warmth and summer coolness. Rain can't get through, but these gossiping old women weren't exactly being nice. They were taking digs at Chu Yang. Bunch of busybodies, Chu Yang thought, not letting it get to him. He revved the engine and zoomed past. The wheels kicked up dirt and leaves, dusting the crowd. Tui, tui, tui. That damn kid. Does he even know how to drive? He's gonna kill himself on that thing. Either drowning or crashing, take your pick. They spat out the dust, fuming. Back home, Chu Yang quickly unloaded the seaweed, then gently poured the 2 bags of sea cucumbers into the fish pond, hooking up the oxygen pump. These were precious cargo. One dead sea cucumber would be a disaster. He watched for a bit. Either these sea cucumbers from the system were extra tough, or something, but they seemed fine, like they'd be okay for at least a day. He quickly tossed some water plants into the pond, giving the sea cucumbers a place to hide, and keeping them out of sight. The pond was tucked away in the back room anyway, deep enough that you couldn't see much unless you were right up on it, but better safe than sorry, Chu Yang figured. With his treasures settled, Chu Yang got on the phone to find a buyer. Only Bai Pengfei and Kai Yu came to mind. He called Bai Pengfei first. "Hey, Bai, what's up?" Over at the Red Romantic Bath Center, technician number 8 just rolled his eyes when he heard the call come in. "Getting a massage," Bai Pengfei admitted. "Yang, what's up? Got something good for me?" "Yep, picked up some sea cucumbers this afternoon." "You interested?" Bai Pengfei practically leaped up. "Wait, did I hear that right? Sea cucumbers? Seriously, Yang, don't mess with me." Chu Yang held the phone away from his ear. "Chill. It's just sea cucumbers. Why would I joke about that? I'll send you a photo." He couldn't help but sound a little smug. Even over the phone, Bai Pengfei could picture his cocky grin, but that didn't matter now. "How big are they?" Bai Pengfei asked. "Over 200 pounds. Chu Yang replied. Bai Pengfei. "See, you are messing with me. Ever seen a sea cucumber that big?" Chu Yang realized the misunderstanding. "No, I meant there's over 200 pounds of them." "Whoa, you got a ton of them?" Bai Pengfei figured Chu Yang got lucky and found a few. Turns out he was way off. He grabbed his bathrobe, peeled off 500 yuan from his wallet, left it on the bed, and bolted out of the bath center. "See you again soon, boss." He hopped into his Cadillac, cranked up the stereo, and enjoyed some matienu on the way. Your damn tenderness makes my heart ache and tears flow. A minute later, Chu Yang's photo came through, Bai Pengfei steered with one hand and opened the picture with the other. Holy crap, that a whole pile of prime sea cucumbers. Save them for me. I'll be there in 3 hours. After calling Bai Pengfei, Chu Yang rang up Caillou. She was just as blown away by the sea cucumber news. Seriously? You're amazing, Chu Yang, but then she sounded disappointed. Wish I could see them myself. Chu Yang realized Caillou was out of town and couldn't get back. Hey, I could have Uncle Zheng get in touch, okay? That would be awesome. He tried not to sound too bummed, knowing it wasn't good for business. After a few more words, Caillou hung up quickly. Through the phone, Chu Yang could hear firecrackers going off in the background. Soon after, an unfamiliar number popped up on the caller ID, showing it was from Quancheng. Chu Yang answered, and it was indeed Uncle Zheng. No need to chat. They just confirmed the details and hung up. Did you get hold of someone for the sea cucumbers, bro? Chu Shi asked. Yep, Chu Yang said, fiddling with his phone. Was it that pretty lady from before? Yeah. So, you like her, huh? Yeah, wait, what? Chu Yang finally caught on, clapped a hand over his mouth, and went to playfully bop Chu Shi on the head. Sneaky little brat, trying to trick me. Hee, can't touch this, Chu Shi giggled, dodging Chu Yang's reach and making faces. But that lady is beautiful. If you want to marry her, you gotta work hard and make money. Chu Yang chuckled and shook his head. You're such a kid. Your big brother's not getting married, okay? But then who's gonna carry on the family line? Mom'll be scolding you in your dreams. Chu Yang, Nyoto Ferry was buzzing with activity. Usually, you wouldn't see Zhangxing for months, but the last couple of days had been a constant stream of visitors. Today, 2 groups arrived at the same time, city folks with money to burn. There was the young guy in sunglasses, holding his phone, with a fancy leather bag under his arm. Like the rich guys in those Hong Kong movies, the other guy, older, was more casual, in khakis and a polo shirt. But the fisherman who'd helped lift the manta ray a few days back recognized him. That was Mr. Zheng, the restaurant big shot who'd showed up on a yacht last time. Seeing both groups heading for Chu Yang's place, the onlookers were practically bursting with curiosity. They wanted to ask what was going on, but they didn't dare. It was like watching a bunch of monkeys trying to figure something out. Chu Yang ignored the gawkers, ushered the guests into the yard, and slammed the door shut. Yang, this isn't cool. You said you'd hold those for me, Bai Pengfei joked, but you could tell he meant it. Before Chu Yang could even answer, Uncle Zheng chimed in, now, hold on, boss Bai. You and Chu are buddies, sure, but what about me? Besides, business is business. Gotta be a willing seller and a willing buyer, right? Can't force the issue. Bai Pengfei shut his mouth and chuckled. Chu Yang had a whole speech prepared, but it wasn't necessary now. To break the tension, he changed the subject. How about we take a look at those sea cucumbers? Both guys nodded immediately. Sounds good. Chu Yang led them to the fish pond, pushing aside the water plants. Uncle Zheng's eyes widened at the sight of the pond. So many top-grade sea cucumbers. Chapter 40. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Holy crap, this one's huge. It's gotta be at least 4 inches thick. This one's a long one, easily over a yard. By the fish pond, Bai Pengfei was crouched down on his haunches, totally absorbed in checking out the sea cucumbers in the pond, like he was gazing at a lineup of supermodels. Yang, you gotta hook me up with these big boys. I've got big plans for them. He pointed at the largest sea cucumber and gave it a playful poke. No way, boss Bai, that's not cool. We agreed highest bidder wins. Uncle Zheng rolled his eyes and shot back, these kinds of rare finds are wasted on most people. Let's be real, giving one of these away is a power move. When you need someone to do you a solid, handing over one of these bad boys is way better than any gift card. Dude, what do you say? This time, Bai Pengfei wasn't backing down. He needed Chu Yang's call on this. Brother Bai, Uncle Zheng, you guys are both good friends of mine and have helped me out before. I don't want anyone to feel cheated. How about this? Chu Yang paused. Brother Bai, you get first dibs on picking 3 of the 5 biggest sea cucumbers, at the same price of course. And Mr. Zheng, I'll give you one for free, no matter what it costs. The plan wasn't exactly a huge payday, but it showed he was trying to be fair. Bai Pengfei was loaded and didn't need the money. Being young and rich, he could be a bit cocky. Seeing Chu Yang let him pick first, he gave a nod of approval. Uncle Zheng wasn't about to argue. It was a seller's market anyway, and Chu Yang could sell to whoever he wanted. Now came the haggling. This plum blossom sea cucumber was top-shelf seafood, so the price was going to be sky-high. After some back and forth, the 3 decided to break it down by length, 1 tier for anything under 8 inches, 1 for 8 to 16 inches, 1 for 16 to 24 inches, and so on. First up were the ones under 8 inches. Not a ton of those, just 7 or 8. Bai Pengfei jumped in with the first offer, $380 a catty, about 1.3 pounds. Keep in mind, that was the price for fresh sea cucumbers. Usually, they lose 70% to 80% of their weight when dried, and the wet-to-dry weight ratio is around 1:10. The best sea cucumbers, lightly dried, without any salt or sugar added, could even get to 1:15. At Bai Pengfei's price, Chu Yang's smaller sea cucumbers were going for the equivalent of $3,800 a catty dried, and a top-quality, lightly dried Liao sea cucumber aged 5 years only went for 3 or 4 grand. 400. Uncle Zheng shot back, bumping the price up $20. Sure, the 8-inch plus sea cucumbers weren't huge, but that depended on who you were comparing them to. Let's just say, any mature plum blossom sea cucumber was a giant among its kind, plus, that size was perfect for restaurants. Plenty of small business owners would drop some serious cash to try it out. If they were any bigger, they'd have to dry them out and stash them away, waiting for the big boss, cough cough, the boss who was destined to be the boss. For 10. Bai Pengfei tried to stay in the game, gritting his teeth and adding another tenner. He and Uncle Zheng were coming from different angles. One was a buyer, the other ran a restaurant. No way their prices could match up. Uncle Zheng could take a $400 sea cucumber, slice it in half, drizzle some sauce, sprinkle some garnish, and slap it on a plate. Boom, $998 a pop, and the ingredients cost less than a couple ounces. What's that? You want to know the price by the pound? For ingredients this precious, high-end restaurants could mark them up 10 times over and still call themselves fair merchants. Uncle Zheng was clearly on a mission to snag these small sea cucumbers and wasn't giving Bai Pengfei an inch. 450. He stated flatly. Bai Pengfei gave him a thumbs up. Boss Zheng, you're a beast. He finally understood how Yu Chuanda felt at the docks that day. Getting out-muscled with cash didn't feel great. Thanks. Uncle Zheng grinned and gave a respectful bow. No need to weigh them right away. He just wrote them down and would weigh them all at once later to save time. Wouldn't want any of them kicking the bucket in the meantime, that would be a waste. Next up, the 8 to 16 inchers. This was the big category, a solid 25 of them. Chu Yang looked over at Bai Pengfei. 520. Bai Pengfei countered. 550. Uncle Zheng didn't even blink. Bai Pengfei's face started to twitch. 570. 600. After a few rounds, Uncle Zheng locked it down at $650 per catty. Boss Zheng, you're not leaving me any room to make a buck, Bai Pengfei said, a little heated, but Uncle Zheng just smiled and didn't budge. Third batch, 16 to 24 inches, 18 total. 700. This time, Bai Pengfei jumped in without waiting for Chu Yang to start. He clearly wanted this one. He knew his funds couldn't compete with Zheng's. He had to focus and win at least one category. 710. Uncle Zheng was starting to sweat. The longer and thicker these things got, the heavier they got. A 16 or 20-inch sea cucumber could easily weigh 2 or 3 pounds, an extra $10 a pound could add up to hundreds of dollars. 720. 730. 740. $750. The price kept climbing until it hit $800, and both guys hesitated. The stuff was good, but they still had to turn a profit. $820. Boss Zheng, I'm out if you go higher. Uncle Zheng thought it over, then shook his head and gave up. At that price, there was still a decent profit margin in his restaurant, but he had to draw the line somewhere. They all had to coexist in the same market, and he didn't want to burn any bridges with Chu Yang. Alright, brother, bye, congrats. Chu Yang also breathed a sigh of relief. The goal was to make money, but it was important to keep things chill. He didn't want anyone getting mad. So far, he was happy to have Bai Pengfei as a customer. 24 to 32 inches, these were huge, even for plum blossom sea cucumbers. At least 10 or 12 pounds apiece, a bit longer and thicker, and they'd hit 20 pounds easy. A sea cucumber that big would be a showpiece, something with real collector value. This time, the brother and sister didn't catch as many, only 10. Bai Pengfei, General Zheng, I can't believe you're saying only. Most regular fishermen would never see a sea cucumber this valuable in their entire lives, and you're slinging around by the double digits. Bai Pengfei half suspected the guy was blessed by the sea gods. 1,000. This time, General Zheng bid first. 1050. Bai Pengfei was right on his heels. 1,100. Zheng's tone was serious. Bai Pengfei took a second to think. 1,300. Boss Zheng, that's my absolute ceiling. I'm not going any higher. He turned to Chu Yang. Yang, I'm not going to mess up your deal. He helped Chu Yang drive up the price and let Zheng save face. Chu Yang just smiled and shook his head, telling him it was no big deal. This wasn't a formal auction. If the price was right, he was happy. Okay, boss buys a straight shooter, and brother chews the same. I guess I gotta pony up. Let's call it 1,350. Uncle Zheng puffed out his chest, playing the old man among wild youngsters. The price was within his budget, otherwise he wouldn't have played along. Nobody wanted to lose money. Alright, Uncle Zheng is the man, Uncle Zheng's the goat. Chu Yang piled on the praise. Another $50 or so, that's a couple grand. Since it was coming free and easy, he wasn't holding back. And now, the grand finale, each plum blossom ginseng over 32 inches long would be worth a king's ransom.